You're listening to the Ecosystem Support 360, a joint podcast to feature individuals, teams, governments, and ecosystems around the globe who are supporting innovation. I'm Andy from Forum Founders, tuning in from New York.
I'm Kevin from Shibula Ventures, also tuning in from New York.
Please like and subscribe to this podcast and keep up to date with what's going on.
Hong Kong is one of the commercial and finance capitals of the world. Strategically located in the South China Sea, Hong Kong boasts several advantages, including hosting over 9,000 international and Chinese companies, with more than half using the city as their regional headquarters and offices. The city hosts a variety of advantages, including their highly skilled workforce, world-class infrastructure, and history of international trade.
Hong Kong has one of the world's most efficient and advanced banking systems, including Asia's third largest and the world's sixth largest stock exchange by market capitalization. We're delighted to have our guest, Ranjit Unnithan, the head of investment promotion for Invest Hong Kong, to share the opportunities available for startups and companies in Hong Kong. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Kevin.
I would love to start off with just who you are, what you do for Invest HK, and where in the world are you with Invest HK?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So my name is Ranjit Unnithan. I work for Invest Hong Kong. Invest Hong Kong is the foreign direct investment arm of the city of Hong Kong. We are a business promotion arm, and we have offices all over the world. So here in the United States, we have an office in New York, we have an office in San Francisco, and I head up the New York team. We have the remit of helping US companies that are interested in expanding to Asia via Hong Kong. And we pretty much help all US companies roughly east of the Mississippi. So that obviously tends to get focused around a few different metropolitan areas, a few different sectors which we can get into. But broadly, we're here to help US companies as they navigate growth opportunities across the world in Asia via Hong Kong. And if I haven't mentioned it already, I'm sitting in New York. So very happy to talk to you about what we do.
Great. Thank you for the intro, Ranjit.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure there are a lot of great things that you do at your office, Ranjit, helping U.S. companies trying to enter Hong Kong, excited about Hong Kong. But for those companies, right? I'm sure Hong Kong is very well known for, again, being a finance capital. Perhaps fintech is one of them. But just for some of us who are still trying to learn about the ecosystem, would you mind talking about what kind of industries are known in Hong Kong? Are there any, for example, particular thematic areas Hong Kong has strong interest in, especially, we just started the new year, 2025. If there's any new initiatives as well from a thematic area standpoint, I think the audience would love that.
Yeah, no, thanks for the question, Kevin. So I think your instincts are right. Like, I think there are, when people think of Hong Kong, they think of, World Financial Center. And by definition, sort of all things finance and fintech are very, very strategic and important for the city of Hong Kong. So this is a major sector. And we can talk about some of the subsectors within fintech, because I think those are pretty interesting to talk about. But finance is clearly number one, as Andy was sort of kindly said in his introductory remarks as well. It's also, as you can imagine, sort of a global trading hub. So it's a connector, and industries that lend themselves well to connectivity, to being a hub, also represent themselves very well in Hong Kong. So, for example, logistics and trade. So there's a lot of trade-related activities that get centered around Hong Kong as well. Consumer, now you may not think Hong Kong is sort of top of mind when it comes to consumer, but it is a huge sort of consumer sector as well. Again, for those same reasons, because a lot of, for example, retail or creative outlets come to Hong Kong to test out the market because it gets a lot of people from around the region coming there. So, for example, from Southeast Asia, from mainland China. So it's a very interesting way, particularly for US founders, to test the market and see how their products or services resonating ahead of potential expansion to the region. Because this is always front of mind for a lot of US founders, because Hong Kong at the end of the day is just 7.5 million people. So you really are there as a stepping stone for regional expansion. So I think that's there. So those are, I would say fairly traditional, but still important sectors for Hong Kong. I would say one thing that might be a little surprising for folks is Hong Kong is in the process of successfully reinventing itself as an innovation and technology hub as well. So, as an example, we crossed 4,500 startups across various technology sectors last year. Um, Healthcare in particular is a big focus. And for 2025, to answer your question, Kevin, healthcare is something that, at least here in the US, we are trying to push pretty aggressively, um, mainly because Hong Kong is a pool of capital, right? Like it's you got capital all the way from seed to series rounds to exits via the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, which is one of the most liquid and largest stock exchanges in Asia. And then Hong Kong is doing a lot of initiatives around data and connectivity to within its own hospital network, within its own research centers, but also across the border in terms of sort of data integrity and data connectivity, so that researchers who want to test out their products or devices across important markets, can do that. So, healthcare and more broadly, innovation and technology is a big push as well. So, those are some of the sectors that we're focused on in Hong Kong.
And Ranjit, is it fair to assume because there are people from all over the world, Southeast Asia, China, that the main language used in business would be English?
That is correct. Yeah. So it's if you are banking, if you're speaking, meeting investors, you're meeting clients, um, English is a very comfortable language to do business in. And that also, I think, shrinks the world a little bit because you know it's not just a language; it's also certain cultural aspects become familiar as well. So one thing that maybe some of your audience already knows is that Hong Kong uses the common law legal system, which is familiar to the UK and to the US. So the business, the law, the language of commerce, or at least the legal language of commerce, is going to be familiar to you, and you'll find sort of the usual suspects in terms of banks and law firms that you've been working with here. You'll find their representative offices in Hong Kong as well. So it tends to be a pretty seamless way of sort of establishing a beachhead in a different continent, but still very familiar.
There's a big range in capital from seed all the way until IPO. For your office, especially sitting in New York, are there any specific focus of like stages of companies that you would want to work with?
Yeah, so I'll answer that in two ways. One is I think one of the things we're trying to do, and Andy, you and I discussed this when we first met, is um, we just want to just increase awareness of the possibilities of Hong Kong to all stages of founders, right? Because um, founders, their choice of global expansion can come in certain points, but if they're not aware of what Hong Kong represents or what, then they're never going to consider it. So I think at the outset, we just want to be talking and to all stages of founders. Having said that, and I don't think this is going to surprise you, the folks that are quote unquote ready for expansion tend to come into two categories that we find. One is almost like at an idea to sort of just startup stage where some of the founders, so for example, they may be PhDs at universities here and they have a really good idea. They think it's ready for commercialization. Just they're just not sure that the city where their university is at is the right place. So they're thinking about where the place might be. So that's like one sort of a type of founders that we find are interested in talking about Hong Kong. The others tend to be ones where they've established some traction. You know, they've commercialized. They have some traction in their home markets. They've done a Series A, Series A plus, maybe ready for Series B, and they have investor backing to go conquer new markets, right? So I think that's the sort of second stage of founders that we talk to. So I guess that's a way of me saying that we want to be increase our mind share with all founders, but the ones who tend to be sort of ready to move fall into those two categories that we talked about.
In your mind, then, do you think Hong Kong is a great fit for basically not just expanding into Asia perspective, but also for founders to consider as potentially a starting point, even those founders who are not currently located in Hong Kong, but perhaps potentially thinking about as you said, a place where they think it would be a good starting point.
Yeah, and I think I think it's helpful to also provide relevant examples of technologies or companies that might fit that profile. So, for example, we talked about finance and fintech. We get a lot of interest from founders who are in what I would call cross-border payment technologies, right? Because Hong Kong is a place where there's a lot of trade between currencies. There are a lot of trade flows between various modalities. And nowadays, also with various types of digital assets. So if you're a fintech company that is operating at the intersection of a lot of those things, then Hong Kong is absolutely a place you want to come and even start sort of seeing what's working. Because in addition to just the market, the private marketplace affording all those possibilities, the regulators are also forward thinking and they're willing to work with you in sort of sandboxes to test technologies across currencies and things like that. So one thing's so I think if you are the sort of fintech firm that wants feedback from regulators, and that's something that you might be, let's just say it might be easier to do in Hong Kong than it might be, for example, in the United States. So I think that's an example of a technology. The healthcare is another one where if you are, again, as you folks both know, there's an aging population in Asia more generally. And if you're interested in devices, technologies, medicines that are targeted at those things, and again, trying to sort of figure out how to serve a variety of markets, Hong Kong might be a place to start that approach. So I think it absolutely fits the bill from a lot of these things. The other thing worth mentioning is the Hong Kong government is investing a lot of resources and funding in these types of companies and founders who, when they set up in Hong Kong, get a lot of subsidies, get a lot of R&D dollars, and even vouchers sometimes to sort of expand their businesses regionally. So there are all these opportunities that are worth checking out as well.
That sounds great. Very attractive for founders of all stages. Rajat, what would you recommend as a way for those founders to like who maybe listened to this and went, "Oh, I never thought about Hong Kong as a destination for my business or starting my company or even growing my company." What would you recommend as a great first step or a first few steps for those founders to get understand the ecosystem, get integrated?
Yeah, so I think I would say there are two. websites that might be worth checking out. One is it's called startmeup.hk. It's the startup resource website for all things Hong Kong. So in that you get a quick view of all the resources that are available, from funding to grants to regulations, all of that, and events that are in Hong Kong. So that's worth checking out. I would also recommend that you folks check out the Invest Hong Kong website. It has a lot of case studies in terms of companies that have established, and you can filter by which part of the world you're from, or which sector you're from, so you can see who are the type of companies that are establishing there. So that's in terms of online resources. I would start there. Um, and then the second thing I would recommend is just go visit. Like if you can, just go visit, because there's nothing like visiting a place to really get a sense of what the heartbeat and what the sort of the dynamic of that place is. We'd recommend going around a few sort of anchor events. So, like if you're interested in sort of all things startup, there's a Start Me Up festival, kind of like New York Tech Week, that happens in Hong Kong in October, November of the year. So that might be a time to sort of go, but it's not exclusively then. There are other road shows that happen to Hong Kong as well. And lastly, please reach out to my office. We're more than happy to talk one on one with folks, provide sort of bespoke guidance, confidential advice in terms of what makes sense for their companies. We're happy to make connections to folks in Hong Kong if it might make sense, so that they have a productive visit when they do visit there. So those are the few things that we'd suggest. If you want sort of the lowest friction one, I would suggest go to the website. But we're pretty accessible, my team here.
How big's your team? How many people in the New York office that support you?
So there's two people in the New York office. We might get that up to three in the not too distant future, um, and we have three people in the San Francisco office as well. So we have, and if you have a Canadian audience, we also have a team out of Toronto as well.
Ranjit, to kind of wrap it up, are there any announcements that you and the office you want to make with Invest HK, um, especially for the next few months, maybe Q1
Yeah, so we,
2025?
we do expect to have a fair number of events and activities, and you're going to see us in a few places in the United States. I think the easiest way I would suggest is to find us on LinkedIn, or find me on LinkedIn,
Hmm.
and you'll see all the events that we are participating in. Um, some things that we'd want to flag this year. So you should expect us to host some events around New York Tech Week, which is in early June. We should be participating at Bio, which is the big healthcare conference in Boston. Um, so those are two events that I'd flag. We expect to participate in more events throughout the year as well, but please find that on LinkedIn.
Ranjit, thank you so much for sharing more about Invest HK to the audience. And we'll add all your information, the links that you mentioned on the episode in the show notes, and then share that information out.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you, Ranjit.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you, Kevin, and thank you for the opportunity to have us here.